it's time to finally start sewing up my nephew's quilt. I have my final layout here, and I'll just kind of go over it briefly with you. It's not super serious, but whatever. So I decided to put all of the 4-pointed stars. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I kind of gave them those positions in the quilt. And then that allowed me to put the flower blocks in the top center, bottom center. And then I have all 8 pointed stars on the outside. And then that left space for these 4 stars in the middle. On the sides, I decided not to put the exact same star across from each other. And I tried to do a white, gray pattern, but it just didn't work out. I still think that I can live with this, so I'm just going to go with it as it is. I had to move a couple of the cornerstones around because I didn't want them touching their exact fabric. Again, that is not something that is super important, but I just chose to work with that little stipulation as well. Now, the side triangles and the in the corner triangles, I cut using the Fat Quarter Shop's cheat sheet that's free on their page. But I think that I made a mistake on it. I feel pretty good about these setting triangles here, and what the pattern or what the sheet asks for is the square size. So the square size that I used is actually this one. So I used the sashing here and then the star block. That's my square that I used. But I think that on the corner triangles, it's a little small because I used the wrong square size. I think that for this one, for the corner, the square should be the square of the sashing. But I'm going to wait and put the rest of it together before I decide what to do about these corners. Even like right now, I know that we have the seam allowance in there, but it just feels small. I'm going to wait until I have it all together, and then I'll decide if I want to keep these triangles or if I need to go get some more fabric and cut more. I have just enough fabric to do like 1 square this size. I don't think I have enough to do 2. But my next step is going to be to start sewing these rows together. Now we are doing diagonal rows, so I'm going to go this way down. So my first row is going to be this sashing row, and then the star block row, and then it goes all the way down the quilt. Sashing row, star block, sashing, star blocks, all the way down. And I think that I'm going to do those first before I add the side setting triangles. So I'm just going to chain piece as much of this as I can, starting here in this corner. So it'll be sewing this cornerstone to this sashing to this cornerstone for this row. Then sewing this sashing to the star to the sashing, and so on. So I'll do that, and then I will come back and show you what all of that looks like. I have finished stitching like stage 1A of sewing this quilt top together. Now I have the rows sewn, so I'll show you like each row. So the rows aren't, so it's like these each one of these rows is like a half row. So for each block, for each row, there's a sashing row and a block row. Okay, so these two together are going to equal 1 row. And then, and then the next 2 and the next 2. And then our center sashing will not have a block row to go with it because then it flips. I'm going to take a few minutes, and pin the rows, and I'll show you how the rows are going to be stitched together after I pin them. Then you'll see this center section doesn't have one. Then that'll be like stage 1B of stitching these together. So let me get these pinned, and then I'll show you what that looks like. Now we can take a look at how these rows are going to go together. I went ahead and pinned the sashing row to the block row. So here on the top side of the quilt, I guess this is considered the top, you can see that the sashing rows are going over, they're on the left side of the block row. So that happens on row 1, row 2, and row 3 of these diagonal rows. but then it's the opposite on the bottom end of the quilt. So these sashing rows actually come from the right. They're on the right side of the block row. But it's still the same. So we still have the same numbers. So 1, 3, and 5, and then 5, 3, 1. Okay, going that way. I'm going to take these down. I don't know if I'm going to take them one row at a time or maybe like 3 rows. Maybe these 3 rows and then bring them back, and then these 3 rows and bring them back. It doesn't really matter ultimately. I am going to finger press towards the sashing row in every case. So no matter what, I'm going to press towards the sashing for these. But let's press them and then we'll bring it, not press them. Let's get them stitched and then I'll bring them back and show you what they look like. I sewed the sashing rows to all of the block rows. And now hopefully you can see that our center sashing row is not attached to either of the rows. And so the quilt is basically split in half. My next step is going to be to add my setting triangles. So let's go back down here where we started. So if I look at my first row, I'm going to add 2 side triangles here, 2 side triangles on the second row, only 1 side triangle here on the third row because that is a corner triangle, and then only 1 side triangle on the fourth row. It's going to be on that end because here is the corner triangle, and then 2, 2, and then there's a corner triangle at the end. So I'm going to pin, I'm actually not going to pin the entire triangle. It is oversized. They are cut a little bit longer, so I know they're going to be oversized. I'm going to pin in just the direction that I know that I need to sew, and then I will take them downstairs and get them sewn. I will bring them back up. I haven't decided if I'm going to go ahead and cut them now, but I might. I might go ahead and cut them down. And I have not pressed anything yet, but I might press after each row is done so that I can have a nice line for cutting. So next we'll put on these setting triangles. We're really getting there. I know it doesn't look like it. That is all crooked. But I have all of the setting triangles stitched to the rows. So let me show you. It looks like on one side of the row, we end up with a lot of triangle. I'll zoom in right here. Let me see. Where is it? So here, it looks like we end up with a lot of triangle left over for like a 1/4 inch seam. But on the other side, not as much. And I think that's because of the way that I stitched it. So on one side, I stitched with, I think on this side for this one, I stitched with the triangle on top, but on the other side, I stitched with the gray on top, so I could start at the where the raw edges are aligned. And I think that's the difference. When this was, maybe when the gray was on top, we ended up with more triangle up at where the seam allowance is there, but then where the triangle was on the, or where the triangle was on top, we ended up with less. I don't know. But it's the same on all of them. On the other side, they're just on the opposite side because the blocks are inverted. Okay, but take a look. I thought, and I still think that the quilt is shrinking up a little bit, but it is just going to be huge. I don't know what the measurement's going to be. The only thing I can come up with right now is it's going to be huge. My next step is going to be, I'm going to start sewing these rows together. I am going to pin because I think that that is definitely going to need it. The cornerstones will help. So I'm going to pin rows 2 and 3. Remember, the first row is sort of the corner triangle that I'm not going to deal with yet. So I'm going to pin these 2 together. Then I'm going to pin this row to the sashing row here. Then I'll do these 2 rows. And then this row I'm not going to deal with yet. because after that I probably pin the last row to the next row. But I'm gonna go ahead and do all the pinning that I can do, and then I'll take them down. I haven't decided if I want to take them down one at a time or just do the whole thing. I probably will just take them down one at a time, but let's get the pinning done, and then we'll see. It doesn't matter, but but as long as it all gets stitched, it'll be fine. And again, I'm going to press towards the sashing rows. And I think I will go ahead and press each set of rows after I'm done with them. I changed my mind about how I was going to stitch it back together. So I want to show you that before I finish this. Now I've stitched these two rows together here, and then I stitched this row to the sashing row, but then I skipped this row right here, and I stitched these bottom two rows together. The reason I did that is because I don't want this center seam to be my very last seam, because those parts of the quilt, if I have to put the two halves together, it's going to be really heavy. So my next stitch is going to be the center seam, because I'm only going to be stitching this part to this part. Okay, so it'll only be two rows basically that are getting stitched together. And then I will pin this side here and then that side here. And so the final two seams. So when I come back, the entire quilt top will be done, except for the corners. So after I come back, we'll talk about what to do about these corners. The entire center of this quilt is now stitched together. It looks really cool. I am excited about how it's come together. I did have a few issues where my points didn't match up, like with my sashing and cornerstones. That doesn't really bother me. But I did have the parts that bother me, this part especially right here, because I thought I had a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but I did not. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. And then I have just sort of set in the corner triangles, and they are not big enough. So I know I'm going to have to go get more of this fabric. And I have enough to do one more square, like one square that's cut in half diagonally. But I think I have to go back to the fabric store for like 1 yard of fabric, or like a half a yard, not even a whole yard. But it still looks cool, and I can't wait to put the corners on to see what it does. So the next time you see the quilt, it will have the corner triangles, and we will have a completed quilt top. I am going to do a little bit of finagling to get my corner triangles without going back to the fabric store. So this is one piece of triangle fabric that I had left over. I cut a rectangle instead of a square. So instead of cutting it, I think it was supposed to be 27 by 27. I cut it by 27. I cut it 27 by 26 or something like that. And so what I need for my corner triangles is a 16-inch square that I'm going to cut on one diagonal. And because I have this big rectangle, I know that I'm going to be able to get a 16-inch square out of it. I'm going to try and keep it as big as I can, so that I don't have to, so I don't waste a lot of it. I mean, it's not going to be waste, but I'll have a lot of fabric left over. So let me cut this square. I'm overcutting just a little bit, and I should have cut the whole thing, but it doesn't matter. And then flip it around. To get the square. Okay. And then, all right, so here's one of my squares. It is 16 inches, so it should be big enough once I cut it across that diagonal to go across the, for the next one, I had pieces like this left over from when I cut my big squares out. And so I took two of these and stitched them together to create hopefully a 16-inch square that I can get from this. I pressed it, or I sewed it with the selvages on either end, so I would have a better idea. And that way when I cut away, hopefully the selvages won't be in the way. So now we'll cut the 16-inch square out of here. I hope this works. I just have a ruler. I hope this works. So we'll see if we can get a 16-inch square out of here. And I think we can. Yep, it's going to be right at the selvage. So I'm going to just be able to get it. I'm going to try to line up the selvage so that I'm sure I'm getting a straight cut. Let me come over this way too, because I don't want to waste any of it. So if I can get some other pre-cuts or some scraps out of this, we want to do that. So I'm just moving it over as far as I can to get a 16-inch, and I could have cut it on two sides, but I didn't. So I have about this much left over. So we'll see what we can get out of that. And then I'm going to cut, I think from this way, I'll put the 16 line down here at the bottom and then cut off two sides. Okay. All right. So here we go. All right, and then the last one, I can just cut off the last side of this. So I'm just lining it up, making sure the 16 is on the edge. And there we go. So from this point, I'm going to cut each one of these on one diagonal and then sew it on all four corners. So I'll show you that when I'm done with it. Here is our completed quilt top. I cannot believe how great this thing turned out. I am excited because I didn't go back to the quilt shop to get more black. I was able to use what I had. Everything looks great. I'll zoom in a little bit so that you can see the ins and outs. It looks so good. Okay. I put the pieced black corner triangles on the top here. I don't even know if you can see it. Maybe just a little bit. But they're at the top. And I don't even notice it. Well, I can barely notice it. As I look at them, I have to kind of squint to see it. And then what I decided to do on the side here was add a long skinny strip right there. You can see it there. And then I just cut around it. And I pressed it again before I brought it back upstairs so it'll lay flat. But I have some pretty good 1/4 inches. That one is a little tight, but I got some good seam allowances that I'll be able to work with. And this one here is just a little tight. But I'm not going to cut the edges off until I get it quilted. My next step is to get the binding ready for it. I think I'm going to go with a red binding. I think. I haven't decided. But I was going to do like a black binding, but now I want to go with a red binding and perhaps a gray flange, or maybe even a really light flange. We'll see what I have in my stash that can kind of work, but man, I really love it. It has turned out like right now, I measured about 81 across to about 106, 107 down. So it's a little bit large for a sofa quilt, but I still think it'll be okay. I'm just so happy with how it turned out. It looks amazing. It has been such a fun journey working on this quilt top. I can't believe that I went from having 9 blocks that were not even stitched together to having a really huge quilt with 18 star blocks. It has been so cool. And I'm excited that I was able to work through some challenges with those triangles to make it work. I am excited to get everything up on the quilt machine and get it quilted and bound so that I can give it to my nephew for his birthday. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey to complete this quilt top and on through finishing the quilt. If you have any questions about what you've seen in the video, leave them in the comments below. Thumbs up this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!